and welcome to NLF Online 2020. I'm Karthika. I will be your anchor for this evening. We will have 2 panel discussions and 1 performance from now till 6:30 p.m. All of you must have already seen this on our social media posts. Each panel discussion will go on for about 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A segment. You could type out your questions into the Q&A box for the panelists to answer. If you'd like a specific panelist to answer, please do add this to your question as well. We will also launch polls while the panel is on topics relevant to the discussion for the audience to engage with the panelists. We would love for you to share your opinions on these, and we will share them with the panelists before we begin the Q&A segment. I now invite 2 of the NLF co-founders, Ms. Kavita Gupta Sabarwal and Ms. Rasil Ahuja, to share their thoughts on the festival. Over to you, Kavita and Rasil.
Namaskar. Hello, everyone. I'm Rasil Kaur Ahuja, and I welcome you to the 2020 Neev Literature Festival and NLF Online, where we bring the the conversations that matter around children's literature directly to you. I'd like to now introduce one of NLF's co-founders, Kavita Gupta Sabarwal. Kavita, over to you. Okay. Kavita's audio doesn't seem to be working. No problem. I'll take it from here. Normally, at this point and this moment, Kavita would be expounding on the importance of history. She would ask you to consider why it is that when we live in the present and are so deeply in the throes of imagining a fabulous future, that we should care about or bother so much with the past. You might have or may want to ask yourselves these questions. How did we get here? Why does the present look the way it does? And how does the past determine the direction of your future? And we would tell you that the answers to these questions lie in our history. Because if you don't understand the present, you'll be planning for your very bright future in the dark. To me, the best analogy is Google Maps. If you don't turn location on, it doesn't know where you are. And how will it get you to where you want to go? Sometimes you just need to retrace your steps, understand where you turned right or wrong, and embrace the path to your destiny. I'd like to leave you today, all the young people watching, with this message. Yesterday, you bore witness to our history. Today, you are the carriers of that history. And one day, you will be makers of that history. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Rasil. One of my co-conspirators for NLF and jury co-chair for Neev Book Awards. It's great to be online. It's a whole new intangible with exciting possibilities. We are doing this for 2 reasons. First, this allows us to move beyond our single location in Bangalore, joining lines across India and the world, something we've always really wanted to do. And not just for our audience, but also our panelists. Today, panelists join us from Canada, Delhi, Gurgaon, Raipur, Chennai, and Lonavala. Second, NLF Online grows a Neev Literature Festival from once a year episodic into a year-round dial tone. Being episodic attracts the human brain, but we will only truly succeed in our mission of growing readers for life when young readers perceive reading as a constant. Our challenge is to always be purposeful in curating our sessions, which we intend to do. Our education system is always removing the complex, the nuance, the ununderstandable, leaving only the technical, the formulaic. But that takes away all imagination from our children, all hypothesizing, all wondering as they grow. Our discussion always aims to bring back the complex into conversations, into wonderings, into imagining. Our theme this year is imaginary lines, and you're probably wondering why. Because humanity is connected and separated by imaginary lines. The lines that connect us are fluid and formed by the languages we speak, the stories we share. The lines that separate us are drawn by genders with which we identify, the religions we bow to or the myths we believe in, and also the geographies that outline our experiences. When we stand on the opposite ends of these lines, the distance seems vast, but all that is needed is a gentle tug to unravel differences in opinions and bridge misunderstandings. NLF Imaginary Lines will draw and redraw our experiences through stories, perhaps intended for children, but really meant for all of us. With that, on to our Independence Day panels today. and the many lines that divide and join, set off by some horrific events in 1947 by the drawing of an imaginary line that partitioned the country into three parts. Now, there's a complexity. We know when partition happened, but do we know why it happened or how it all really began? History, as all historians say, is all about studying perspectives and available facts. Over to our first panel.
Thank you, Kavita and Rasil. Who we have with us today to moderate the first panel is a very exciting author. Now, as you all know, our first panel is on Partition, Memory and Memorialization, moderated by Siddhartha Sharma. Siddhartha is a journalist, a historian, and has authored The Grasshopper's Run, Year of the Weeds, Carpenters and Kings, Western Christianity and the Idea of India. He also has a new book coming out soon. Thank you so much for being here, Siddhartha. We'll now hand it over to you to introduce the remaining panelists and to take the discussion forward.
Thank you very much, Kartika. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm glad we could all be here under the circumstances. This is as good a time as any to look at our history, as Rasil mentioned, to locate ourselves where we are today and to understand where we are going. And in a conversation like this about independence, about partition, it's very important that we listen to lived experiences and that we talk to people who are associated with trying to understand what partition is. I'm sure you have read about it in your school textbook. There are a lot of things connected to partition. It wasn't just a historical event. It keeps affecting generations over the years. And today we have three very interesting, multifaceted, well-known people with whom we are going to talk about these things. Our first speaker is Mallika Ahluwalia. She is the CEO and co-founder and the curator of the Partition Museum at Amritsar. Our second speaker is Kamla Bhasin, activist, also a writer of children's books. I'm sure you've read several of her works. And Mr. Santosh Sivan, the well-known cinematographer, director, and actor. The Partition Museum was started in 2016. So if you could just tell us how the idea started, because it's the first museum of its kind in India. It's been more than 70 years since the event, and a lot of the witnesses of that period are no more. How did this idea begin? You could just tell us about it.
So Siddhartha, I mean, basically I come from a partition family. Three of my four grandparents were affected by the partition. And so really it was a very personal project for the founders who similarly had parents or grandparents who had been impacted. And there was this sense that we were running out of time, that generation it was now the last generation that was there. And we really felt very strongly that in their lifetime, that there should be a museum or memorial that acknowledges and shares their experiences. So from the very beginning, it was very clear that this was going to be a people's museum that told the stories of the millions of people who were affected by the partition. And that was really the heart of it. We started working on it in early 2015. And honestly, when we started, I thought that this is going to be like a 10-year journey. We had no building, no collection, no money, no organization. We thought, okay, we'll get there slowly. But we just got such an outpouring of support from all directions. So many people came forward. And really, that was the only way the museum could happen, because they shared their objects, their stories, volunteered their time, gave their expertise. So we call ourselves a people's museum because we tell the stories of people, which is a very different way of understanding history rather than looking at nation states or leaders. We really talk about what happened with the people, but we're also a people's museum in the sense that it's really the efforts of just hundreds of people and their love and support that made the museum possible, because it was opened really quickly in time for the 70th anniversary, because there was this collective sense that 70 years had been too long, and it really felt like the museum needed to open. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the People's Museum part of it. The fact that these are histories of the people rather than of big names, administrators, and rulers. So a large part of the exhibits are also everyday objects of the people who survived these events. Uh, what was the process like in collecting these exhibits and the stories that go with these objects?
So it was really a very organic process. The first object that went into the museum was actually a book that my nani's family had carried with them when they came. And that became, like I said, the first object in the museum. And we then slowly started reaching out to people, first within our own circles. As we told more people, they started coming forward. We started doing small pop-up exhibitions, starting first with Delhi, then moving to other cities. And as people came to these and saw what we were trying to do, they came forward. So this tin box you're seeing here belongs to a lady called Sudarshana Kumari, and her family actually came to one of our exhibitions in early 2016, and they were so moved. They said, we have objects in our family. So they gave us this tin box, they gave us a thali, a glass, the things that they had carried with them when they came. And slowly that's how the museum was built. So all the objects in the museum, they tell the story from that very personal perspective. They say that this is my story, this is what happened to me, which is a very different way of looking at history, because we often don't have that perspective. And I think it's also one of the things that makes it really powerful and engaging for people when they come, is that you hear, every gallery has 5 or 6 TV monitors on it. You hear first-hand person testimonies. Somebody says, I walked in the rain for 3 days without food or water. I had to hide under the train seat when the train was attacked. It's a very powerful first-person account that really makes history come alive. So really that it was a process of reaching out to more people, who then connected us to more people. And once we set up the curtain raiser of the museum in 2016, many people came there and felt moved to share their family stories. Also, it's also a way of paying tribute to your parents, grandparents, to know that their story is being heard. And I think for a lot of people that was important. The tin box you just saw, when we recorded Sudarshanaji's interview, she cried and she said, finally somebody is hearing what I went through, So I think it was also cathartic for a lot of people, but it is a very different way of looking at history. And that's really part of what's in the museum. In addition to that, we do, as you see on the screen, we do have newspapers, we have archival photographs, we have the iconic videos from that time of the very tragic way people had to travel on foot in kafilas or by train. So all of those things are there, but really the heart of the museum are these objects that have been donated by families. So refugee cards that document people's journeys from camp to camp. We have clothing that they brought with them. We have the water pots that they use to get water on their journey. And all of these tell that story so much more powerfully because they are very real lived experiences.
Yes, and you also mentioned the videos of accounts of witnesses of that period, which the witnesses who are still alive, and quite a lot of them have been posted on your website, and these are accessible on online. So, for if young people are interested in watching these videos, they can access them.
We do post a lot of things on our social media pages. If young people are interested, they should definitely follow us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. We do try and share material, and definitely more and more so since COVID, when the museum has now been closed for 4 months. So it is obviously important for us to increase that. So we have been working on that also. But otherwise, I'm actually a believer in the power of physical spaces. So I encourage everybody to come to the museum and immerse themselves, because I think that's also a very different way of experiencing it. It's built as a very multi-dimensional, interactive space. So,
Yes. Talking of the actual visit, you also have art by noted Indian artists, reprints of limited edition reprints of by noted artists. And one of the things I found interesting was almost all of them in their conversations with you have told you that at the beginning they did not think of drawing or painting their experiences. At the beginning, they were only focused on the basics of survival. It was only afterwards that they looked back and put their experiences in art. What was it like talking to these great painters? Satish Gujral, I think, is one of the artists whose works can be found.
Yes. So we have Satish Gujralji's paintings. We have Krishan Khanna's. We have Arpana Kaur. We have S.L. Parashar. It is interesting, actually, if you look at their different experiences, how they thought about art and their own memory or their own experience. And for example, Satish Gujral, as you say, after Partition, he says, I was not planning to paint Partition, but Partition is what came out. And you can see there's just such power in those paintings. You can see the agony in many of those paintings that comes out. With someone like S.L. Parashar, he became a camp commandant at the Baldev Nagar camp near Haryana, and in Haryana near Ambala, and he was so distraught by what he saw all around him that he would just pick up any scrap of paper and sketch on it, with like whatever piece of coal he could find or whatever, stub of a pencil he could find. So in the prints we have there, you can still see the crumpled nature of the paper, that he literally just picked up anything. And again, you can see that agony. Like some of the sketches are called cheek, screech and things like that. You can see the power in it. So in fact, this weekend we're doing a online exhibition, a virtual exhibition, where many eminent and emerging artists have come together. They've put forward their works, and it's called Memories Unlocked. And it talks about this idea of the connections between art and identity, art and home, art and memory. So I encourage everyone to go online and look at that.
Yes, I'm sure they will. You've also had sessions with young people who visit your museum and record their experiences, and you have some videos of these young people. So could we maybe see one or two of them?
Yeah. So actually, for us, young people, the youth are a very important target audience. We've really tried from the beginning to engage with them. We have a strong school engagement program, and that works with both the private schools who want to come. We've had schools from Delhi come, schools from Bangalore, schools from Bombay. They come and visit us, and we do a series of guided activities. In addition, we have started a set of activities with local schools, government schools, lower socioeconomic demographics, who otherwise might not have visited a museum. So I want to play you a short clip of one of the girls who came through this government school program. And, she, for example, had never been to a museum before. So I'll just play you the clip and then I'll talk a bit more about it. I'm just going to quickly play one more short clip.
Hi, everyone. Mallika, there seem to be a few technical glitches with the video playing. So what if we share it with the audience members after the panel discussion? Would that be all right?
Okay, so those two clips give you a sense of, hi, am I still there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Did you see them? Was I sharing my screen?
Yeah, we saw the first one.
Oh dear, okay. But you heard the second one?
No problem.
No.
Yeah,
okay.
we did. We heard some of it.
Okay.
But,
So,
yeah.
Sorry about that. So basically, Siddhartha, what I wanted to just share through those clips was, we all grew up in an education system where we did have some exposure to museums. But what you often see is it's kind of a forced march past, like you go into these things and you see these school groups and they're in a line and they're being told, don't touch anything, don't, do this, don't do that. And so one thing we were very clear about is that was not how we wanted young people to engage with our museum. So that's been built into the design, but it's also been built into the activities that we do with students when they come. So, for example, the museum is it's got a lot of audiovisual in it, like a lot of these oral history videos. So we find that students really find that very engaging. Even if they don't want to read the text, they really engage very much with the videos. In addition, we've designed activities so that they are very, what you would call reflective. So you want to have, we cover some amount of facts. We do want people to learn something about history, but bulk of what we do with the students is what we would call reflective or dialogic activities, where we say, look back on the future, look back on the past, what have you learned, what do you think, but also look to the future, how does this apply to your life? So I don't know if you heard the second one, but in the first one, she was asked that question and she said, this history is 70 years old, how does it matter to you?
Yeah.
And so her takeaway was
very interesting conclusions from it.
And the second student,
she had
I don't know
very
if you could hear or not, she said that what she took away from it was hope. That these refugees came, they lost everything. She gave the example of Milkha Singh and the person who founded MDH and said, they came, they lost everything, and yet they move forward, and women especially should not miss. And so she said, that is really important. That's what she did. So for us, we use the base of partition to talk about a much broader set of things. We talk about freedom, we talk about empathy, we talk about resilience. And so really try and we've designed a set of activities that students engage in and to really make them think a bit more about how we can learn from the past, but also learn from it for the future. And especially understand that this is their own history. So one of the other set of things that we do is get students to record the stories of their grandparents. And that has been incredibly effective. The student, we've heard from so many cases that it has opened up dialogues within families. The things that, you have never been spoken about between grandparents and grandchildren. And now once they open that dialogue and you're talking about something like this, it opens up a lot of other spaces also. So that's again been something we found has worked really well.
Yeah. So talking about dialogue and hope, Kamla Bhasin, activist, poet, children's author, girls also want Azadi, rainbow girls, rainbow boys. We are familiar with her works, and we are also familiar with what she has done in terms of engagement with her friends in Pakistan. It's a long story covering several decades of friendship built over several visits. Kamla, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So if you could tell us about how you built this friendship with people across the border. You were born there in Shahida Wali. That's where the story begins.
First of all, Azadi Zindabad, friends, celebrating at least our liberation, our freedom from the British. The other freedoms are yet to come for the majority of the people of our countries. Yes, Siddhartha, I was born in a tiny village in Punjab called, beautiful name, called Shahidawali. But my father was already, as a young man, working in Rajasthan. So after my birth, we came back. This was 1946. And then suddenly, my village, which was in India, they told me went to Pakistan. I don't know how the village moved to Pakistan. I mean, but it went. And then it was only after 40 years, 1983, that I went back to Pakistan as a grown-up woman, because now I was working with the United Nations and doing a South Asia work with human rights defenders, NGOs, people's organizations, bringing them together to share their views and experiences with each other. Because I've always felt that what I can learn from US or Canada or America, I can barely implement in the villages of India. But if there is a good project in Pakistan which has succeeded, then I can copy it here. So that's the work I have done now for 46 years. So between 1983 and 2020, I must have visited Pakistan like 55 to 60 times. And some of my closest friends are from there. And in fact, the slogan, I'm quite famous for Azadi, was a slogan I learned from the feminists in Pakistan. They were at that time fighting President Ziaul Haq and his anti-women policies. And that's where I had learned it. And in the last 35, 40 years, we have had a lot of exchanges of people from one country to another, exchanges of books. You know, I wrote children's rhymes, challenging gender norms, where father is changing the nappies and singing a lullaby. They were put to music by a friend called Munize Hashmi. She's also the younger daughter of Faz Ahmed Faz. So she has an organization there called Azad Foundation. So lots and lots of relationships, friendships. In fact, between yesterday and today, we have had 4 webinars on Indo-Pak friendships. So there is a whole group of people who want India and Pakistan to live together as neighbors. And that's what we are working on.
You also have an annual tradition which you observed last night on the intervening night of August 14 and 15, where you meet near the Wagah border. This time it was not possible, so you met online. But so how did that tradition begin?
24 years ago, many peace activists led by Kuldeep Nair, one of our senior most citizens, passionate about peace, and Asma Jahangir, a lawyer, human rights defender in Pakistan, and hundreds of others. 24 years ago, we started it and we said we will meet at the Atari and Wagah border every year on the night of 14th and 15th. So first we would have a 2-3 hour program in Amritsar and in Lahore. Then we will all go to the border, and whenever the relationships were good between the two countries, we were allowed actually to see each other, come that close. But then these days, we just are about half a kilometer away from each other. We can sometimes hear each other's slogans, but we can't meet each other or see each other. But we still go. And the media, they come with us. So at least we can tell the world that it is not true that Indian and Pakistani citizens don't want peace. Maybe our governments don't want peace. Maybe other governments of other countries don't want peace. But majority of the people of the two countries, I believe, want peace. And the people who do these are those people who have this slogan, Boli, Boli. No bullets, dialogue. My two most favorite slogans have been, मैं सरहद पर बनी दीवार नहीं, मैं तो उस दीवार पर पड़ी दरार हूं. I'm not a wall that divides. I'm a crack in that wall. And my other slogan is, walls turned sideways are bridges. So, you know, we can either talk of separation or just remove the S, put an R, it becomes reparation. Reparation, bringing people together. And sometimes, Siddhartha, families have partitions among them, brothers have partitions, sisters have partitions, but a partition just means that I am making my own space. And after that, we can be friends. And we believe neighbors have to be friends. We can't throw Pakistan from our neighborhood. Pakistan can't throw us from our neighborhood. And there is so much which unites us. So we keep hoping for peace and love and friendship.
You also have young people who participate in making peace calendars.
Yeah, there is a fantastic group called Aagaz-e-Dosti, the beginning of friendships. These are people from both sides, and they work with school children and college children. And again, for the last 10 or 15 years, they have been having competitions in schools and saying, make a picture of Indo-Pak friendship, and then 6 pictures are selected from Pakistan and 6 from India. And those 12 pictures make the calendar year after year. And then those are shared in both the countries. There is another fantastic organization started by 2 big media houses, Aman Ki Asha, the hope of peace. And then there is Pakistan-India Peace Forum. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of organizations working for peace. But unfortunately,
yes, I'm sure our young viewers would like to participate in these activities. I'm sure some of them have already.
I'm sure.
Right. Mr. Sivan?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Sivan, are you there? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah.
A lot of we talked about art that comes out of partition and the independence period. We talked about how it's visualized by succeeding generations, and a lot of how we have visualized the independence movement comes from the cinema created by you. But before I go on to Kala Pani and Before the Rains, I want to talk to you about that. Before that, I wanted to talk about Tahan and Birbal the Donkey and making cinema for children. What has the experience been like? How is?
Yeah, actually, it was amazing listening
how is making cinema for children?
It was actually amazing listening to Mallika and Kamla talk about their involvement. I love to go to the museum. I love what Kamla has been doing. I think it's amazing. I was not aware of all this actually, but it's very good. I think, freedom movement for us, because we were born post independence, so it has only been stories, So I've listened to a lot of interesting stories most of the time. It used to be about people having to lose so many. Most of them are in UK now, so they shifted base to UK and they succeeded very much there. But they always tell me that they used to have so much of things that they had to, forgo and come back here and things like that. So a lot of people's future has been reshaped by partition, I would say. I have not had a direct experience with it, but I've actually been thinking about it only because, at one point in time, my dad used to take me through to this place called Wayanad, which is winding roads to the hill stations of Wayanad, the spice village, where I thought it would be interesting. And my dad used to tell me that these roads were built by the British people, though there were no Britishers that time, which prompted me to make a film on culture clashes and how a road will intrude into nature, things like that. And so I made a film like that. And finally, a person who actually was totally subjugated to a British person in the tea estate, finally decided that he has to think of himself as a own person and decides to join the freedom movement. So I've made films like that because of whatever I've heard of these things. And so Tahan is a very interesting thing because Tahan is, when I went to Kashmir to do the film, my whole impression of Kashmir actually changed because it was not about what I was reading in the press. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was not about reading what is in the press. It had a different reality there, because, my film was about a donkey and, and also I was helped by a lot of writers from Kashmir. So the film is very metaphorical because it dates back to Akbar if you look at names and things like that. And so it talks in a wholesome way about Kashmir, which is why actually the Kashmir people also wanted me to come and make more films there. But the fact is that it did not try to, have the usual formula of the terrorist versus the police and or the army and things like that. But it tried to see a positive side to it, which is what I like it to be in a children's film, almost like a fable, actually, But when I went there, I realized that a lot of people, if you look at the plight of, despite independence and all that, the Kashmiri Pandits went through hell, and it's not because of their Muslim neighbors or anyone. The Muslim neighbors were very supportive of them. But the people who came from outside or from wherever, they attacked when these people, the Muslim people were in the mosque, So the reality there is very different because you cannot suddenly disengage people who have grown up together and suddenly become hostile, So I think, if you look at it in a detailed manner, I would say that even Kashmiris today, a lot of people think that it was a black period in their time when the Pandits who they had existed long time back had to, be going away as refugees. So I think, every place has stories and these stories just carry on, whether in literature or in movies or whatever. And whatever little thing that we can do, we of course try to add on to it because, filmmaking is not very easy because there's a lot of commercial aspect to it also. So it cannot just be whatever you feel like. Though I think there are quite a few of them who would like to express themselves through celluloid because it has such a mass reach, But the fact is that when I was shooting Kalapani, the film, and I got to a lot of stories about kind of people who knew about the British people and how they actually believed in divide and rule. The divide and rule thing was very much prominent, and so actually they encouraged it more and more to happen. Which actually carried on.
So you talk to veterans of the.
Some of them.
So, Mr. Sivan, while shooting, you talk to veterans. And how did you visualize that period as cinema? How did you visualize that period? Did you rely on photographs, archival footage, videos?
Yeah, actually, that's quite elaborate, to put together everything, because I think, when you make films, sometimes you just want to make something very realistic and true to what you have seen. And sometimes filmmakers get an opportunity to create your own world. So this is like your own world. And if you go to a place like Andamans, which I don't know if you have gone to, there's this place called Ross Island, which is amazing, because they had made an exact replica of a British society with bakery, church, everything like that. And today it is fully in ruins and taken over by the trees. It's an amazing place, actually. So you get inspired by seeing all these things, and then maybe you try to do some kind of justice to it. But the story that I heard was very interesting, because this guy was very upset, actually, about partition and everything in general, actually, because he was telling something that India had the most peaceful independence, where the British people left and there was no bloodshed. But it is strange that after that, there was so much of bloodshed and bitterness when the partition happened.
Yes.
And so this gentleman was saying, why couldn't the Hindus and Muslims think and get subdued for 300 years before? For 300 years, why did they subdue themselves? Why couldn't they get together and chase these people out instead of taking all this rubbish? So it is a very different way of looking, actually. But the fact is that world over, everyone knows that we have had a freedom struggle which was very peaceful. But what followed that is it's unbelievably tragic, actually. So I think, if you look at it that way, and when he says it, because maybe he has lived through some of the experiences, you realize that this divide and rule, which started with the Portuguese, I also made a film about the Portuguese coming and, taking over our place and things like that, in Kerala, for spices. So it has been going on since then, and it is, and when you look at today, Babri Masjid happening, I sometimes feel it is almost like more than religion and language and everything. I feel the whole turbulent quality of the humans is basically like a mob mentality. I feel it's a mob mentality. I personally think that, when people get together and suddenly they can stand for religion, language, states, we have been seeing it all over the world, actually. And so, and for that matter, even children who are studying in school or in college, they can unite and be very violent. So I think it is just a matter of something that ignites them. And then they can become a very different sort of people, irrespective of religious and everything. You see all over India, actually, you realize that happens quite often, actually. So I think it is basically a mob reaction also. So religion might be just another aspect of it, but it can be in language, states, everything. So I think, and when you reflect on it, you also realize that people do say that men hunt in pack. For example, I have this very good friend of mine who was a taxi driver in UK. So when I went to film in UK, I used to have this Pakistani taxi driver who always used to be with me. And for him, seeing me was like the most delighted thing in his world. You know what I mean? Because suddenly he identified himself and me as brothers, like, even though I don't even speak the language Hindi. And so he had so much to share. And his common enemy was the Goras, or the whites, because I think he must have gone through hell because of that, And he used to always complain and do this and do that and celebrate everything. And to the point that I think, I was in one of their parties and it was strange, but when when India beat England, they were rejoicing. It is not the same case when Pakistan and India play. But when India is playing Australia, almost all of them are actually, trying to encourage India to beat Pakistan, because there's some kind of a common, opposition like that, And suddenly they're all brothers, and you feel that have you been reading the papers wrong or what, and what is happening in the border, just like Kamla was telling, there is a lot of love with the people because we all share a common kind of a background. So I think sometimes I feel that maybe, which is why I think, we like to make films which might somehow give you a feeling of that, even though I have not really made a film totally on freedom movement or anything like that. Maybe I'm not really well versed in it, but the fact is that I think most of Indians are all peace-loving people, at the end of the day. So I think we all like peace, and whether there is different kind of movements, we are also very objective. See, I'm from Kerala, and we still, have a very different way of governing things and, following a very different kind of a pattern than the normal traditional way, you know what I mean? So I think what we require is through literature, and like you people are doing this, stories, you educate the people. I think the people need to be educated, and they need to be objective about what they should be thinking, not be fed with this and that and media and all these things. They should actually be empowered by having their own mind and speaking for themselves. For that, I think it is important that we spread literature and everything, so that they can view it very objectively. Like the museum and like Kamala's endeavors, which is amazing. I think it is really. I should hats off to people who are so committed and so much in doing things like that. I'm really touched by all that. Thank you.
A message of hope there. Message of hope. Kamla, before we move on to audience questions, and I'm sure there are a lot of them. Kamla, I got to know that you visited the museum for the first time last year. So what were your impressions of it?
As Mallika was saying, that you actually hear so many voices there. I mean, every room has these videos going on, and you listen to real people talking about real stories. That's absolutely fascinating. So I was very, very impressed, and I was very happy that those things are there, and they're not just, they're stories of people helping each other also, and they're not all stories of hatred and conflict. They're stories of love. They're stories where both sides give so much to each other to save each other. So I think it's an absolutely unique thing, and a beautiful building. I mean, I was very happy to see that building in a very beautiful area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these narratives are also very important to talk about today, considering where we are as a country in terms of independence.
I just want to say, one of the questions we were asking, whether it is important to talk to our children in the past. I mean, it's absolutely important, but if you look at our mainstream media, I mean, every night on majority of the television, you think as if there's a virtual war going on between India and Pakistan, night after night. So since that kind of propagandistic and really hate producing stuff going on, we might as well teach our children some real facts that, why it happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the first step towards correcting a lot of things that might have gone wrong with our more recent history. Shall we move on to the results of the polls and questions from the audience?
Yes, absolutely. We do have a few results from the polls that we'll share, but before that, I just want to tell the audience that we see that a lot of you have raised your hand. Because it's a Zoom webinar, we're not able to take questions personally, but we hope that you've had your questions clarified by typing them in the Q&A box. So the polls that we asked our audience was, first, do you know there is a Partition museum in Amritsar? 55% of them have said no, but 8% of them have said they've visited. And we have some very flattering and appreciative remarks about the Partition Museum that's there in the Q&A section that we'll share with all of you very soon. Do you or your, I know, it's wonderful. Do you or your family have friends from across the borders? 65% of them have said no, which is quite interesting. Have you watched the following films on partition? We've given them a list of 5 films. We have Gandhi, which is a frontrunner, followed by The Legend of Bhagat Singh. So that's it for the polls. We have one interesting question that's come up from the students, which I will just share with you. This is from Azad Rishikesh. Do you think school children are taught about the history of partition enough? What else can be done so that children understand the history of partition and apply it to the modern context to make the world a better place?
Mallika, I must tell Azad that I love his name. I wish my parents had called me Azad, but Mallika will answer the question.
Gee, I think, obviously I don't think enough has been taught about our history. And I think especially the way history is taught in our schools, it's very much about mugging up every single fact. I mean, that is certainly how I learned history, was memorizing my history book from back to front and making sure I could regurgitate it on the exam. And that unfortunately makes history very dry for a lot of people. Whereas we have such a rich and vibrant history, not just of the freedom struggle, but even beyond. And so I think one thing that we have found particularly effective, coming back to this idea of the People's Museum, is really to talk about how history affected your community, your family, your neighborhood, your town, your village, the country, but look at it from the perspective, not just of the nation state or the leader, but once you start talking to young people or old people, it's immediately much more interesting. So I think that would be something I would highly encourage, that let's take history out of, the context of just, this is the Gandhara Buddha that we must all look at, which, is very beautiful. But let's also talk about the history of the people. And I think when you start doing that, you'll find students engaging a lot more. And I've already talked a bit about what we do at the museum, and we have an extensive school outreach program. We love taking pop-up exhibitions in a non-COVID world to schools. So if anyone here is interested in that, we'd be happy to do that. We like doing a lot of activities with students. So again, our museum is definitely there as one spot to engage with students on the partition. We have a program for that. If you're interested, please email us at info@partitionmuseum.org. But other than that, I think any school could take up this baton. We've had schools who have had children create their own projects and their own exhibitions. And for example, we tied up with Doon School a few years ago, where the students there looked at the history of Doon at the time of partition. Their students went across the border. There were letters that were exchanged. There were students who couldn't come back. And we then came in with our extra archival material and co-curated a much larger exhibition. But the base of it was the experience of the school. And that could be done in any school. You could look at the history of the students, their grandparents, great-grandparents, with the freedom struggle. Where were they? Where were they when that happened? What were they thinking of? And that immediately makes history more engaging. So I would encourage everyone here to try look at that aspect of history.
Thank you so much, Mallika. Siddhartha, Kamla, and Mallika, we have one interesting question from a student, Ditya Nair. And because both you, Kamla and Mallika, you've done so much work, the student has asked, how does it feel to set up something which has such a large impact?
I haven't set up anything like a museum, but I have set up networks and friendships which are located in the hearts of people. And these are not few hearts, they are by now. I mean, I've been doing this work since 1975. So 45 years. And thousands of hearts have these musea, have these temples and masjids of love and friendships. And all of us are believers of love and friendship. And I mean, you have no idea how it feels. Are dil khush ho jata hai yaar. I mean, mohabbat dil mein ho. And I was thinking today that, even in our families, we teach so much othering. You are a Hindu, you are a Muslim, you are rich, you are poor. how we narrow the world of our children. I mean, our children are born human. The whole world belongs to them. But then they turn us into, you are a girl, you are a Hindu, you are a Brahmin, you are a Dalit, you are a South Indian, you are dark, you are... I mean, if we could just free our children and go back to the notion that we are born human, nature makes us human, and somehow tell the society not to play these power games. And I think these are all power games. These are games to keep some people down, like women, like Dalits, like minorities, like transgender people. And you know, I've been doing this work for 46 years, but my God, the freshness of this work and the challenge of this work. And my life has been full of tragedies, full of personal challenges. And I feel if I had not had this work, I would be dead. मतलब मेरी death ही हो जाती. मतलब maybe not physical death, but mental. And it is this work where you have something larger than your self-interest. Not just me and my 2 children. I mean, dogs look after 20 children. What is human beings looking after 1 child or 2 child? So I can tell everybody there's nothing like having a job which is like your hobby. So your hobby should be your jobby.
Thank you so much, Kamla. I think those are great thoughts for us to come to a close. But Siddhartha, I'll leave you to do this.
Yes, and before we end, I had a question for Mr. Sivan.
Mr. Sivan, unmute kariye. So there.
Are you there, sir? Okay, I think we've lost him.
No, I am here. I'm here. I'm very much here. I've been listening to.
Right.
I've been listening to the charming Kamla talking about this thing. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, she had a beautiful message. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Sivan, what is it like shooting with children? What is it like making cinema with children? How is the experience different from so-called
Actually,
adults?
I've made quite a few children's movies, you know. Basically, whatever I learned in school, I wanted to make into films, you know. So whatever little stories I had and some personal experiences. I think working with children is not, I would say, is easy. It is not like working with Salman Khan and Shah Rukh Khan, of course. It's a very different kind of a thing, because I believe that you have to let the child take you forward, you know. So it is about going with the flow, you know. Most children will take a chance, you know. They will take a chance with you, because, you know, when I was when I was taking some class for kids, and we asked these children in the 8 years or more to draw their favorite picture, you know. And you will find that out of 10, about 8 or 9 of them would paint the typical 1 sunrise and 2 hills and 6 birds flying and 1 boat and something, you know, their favorite picture. But 1 or 2 would do very different kind of things, you know. So one such person decided that the most beautiful thing is God, so she wanted to paint God. Okay. So the teacher said, but how will you paint God? You have not seen it before. Then she looked at her and said, in 2 minutes, I will show you how he looks, you know. So they will take the chance. So I think it is very important to listen to them and try to go with their flow than trying them to manipulate, to do like this and do like that, which is what I have been doing all this time. And it's very strange, because good thing you asked me this, because one of my girl in Malli, she's a scientist in US now. The one in Halo has got married, you know, and to a Chinese person actually. And so they come and cook Chinese food for me. And she always hates me for treating her like a little one. And then another one in Tahan is now in Australia. So all these people still keep in touch, and I'm very, very, it is something like a revisit actually. So then you realize that when I did a film called Malli, which is a film which I learned in school actually, and I want to make it, and then I cast one particular girl for the main role, but I had a lot of people auditioning for that role. And there was one girl who was deaf and dumb, and she was very upset that she's not going to be in the film because she's deaf and dumb. So then you realize that you didn't want to make her feel bad, and she was full of enthusiasm and all that. So I decided that I will incorporate her into the film. And so you incorporated her into the film and changed the story a bit so that we would give her, because if you're going to make it for a children's film, then it should be for all children, you know what I mean? And then used her in a very interesting way. But we used to treat her very normally. We would take her to the middle of the forest, make her sit on the road, and then all of us will disappear just to see what she will do. So we were never over kind to her or anything, because that I think is not a great idea, because when people like that who are a little bit, have a handicap, they always feel that they are given a privilege because of the handicap. So we always try not to give them that, feeling, and we treat them all very normal. So it's great fun to have children, but I still haven't figured out how I'll handle my 11-year-old son even now. But that is also about it actually.
That's an ongoing.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Sivan. I thank the panelists for the wonderful discussion, and
you
the
too,
audience.
Siddhartha, you've been amazing.
And thank you very much. Kartika.
Thank you so much. Siddharth?
I think yes.
Kamla?
So we can proceed.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Siddharth, Kamla, Mr. Santosh, and Mallika, for sparing your time. We are very grateful that we got to hear from you and that we got to spend the launch of our event with you. Thank you so much.